For homework, you're going to complete a small assignment that will prepare you for adding a background or other ideas about yourself into your gridded portrait. So you're going to take a look back at your top 10 list that you did the other day. You're also going to take a look at your photograph, and I also want you thinking about the All About Me assignment and think about what you're all about. What do you enjoy? What do you like? What things do you like to do? So what you're going to do is in your sketchbook, which is also your little folder, you're going to go ahead and you're going to draw two boxes that are the same general orientation as your photograph. Then what you're going to do is you're just going to take about 30 seconds each and you're going to get your overall head shape. So my head is kind of off to the side. I have a nose, I have eyes. Notice this is not nice and neat, okay? It's just showing that my head is off to the side. So I'm doing that for both of these. I have my head off to the side. I see my lips. I see my shoulder going in there. That took 15 seconds, maybe each drawing. Then I need to think about myself and what I want to show about myself. So one of the things that I had used before is I like to snowboard. So now I want to think about all the things I think about that go with snowboarding. So I think about it's wintertime. Wintertime, you have to have snowflakes. Maybe a snowboard would be one of the most obvious little pictures to represent it. I could do icicles. I could use color, but we're not going to use color yet. What else could I add that would be, related to snowboarding? Maybe mountains, maybe trees. I like to snowboard through the trees, especially if I happen to be up north. So now I'm going to start to think about all those things and think, okay, how can I represent that in one of these pieces? So I'm going to write snowboarding because that's what I'm going to show. And maybe for this one, maybe I'm thinking of it as kind of frozen pieces. So I'm thinking of kind of like triangles that are all coming together. It looks like they're kind of freezing pieces of ice. So they're going to be heading different directions and doing some of those things. And now I'm going to kind of mimic that overall piece. I'm going to repeat it over and over again. So I'm trying to make it kind of look like a fractured water that's freezing to represent that it's very cold in the wintertime, which is when I like to snowboard. So I'm going to write snowboarding on my piece, but I'm also going to somehow show it. Okay, so snowboard, and I'm showing kind of like ice. Then I want to think about a second idea. So one of my other ideas was that I like to sew, and one of the things that I like to sew is quilts. When I'm doing quilts, I'm thinking I'm using fabric, I'm sewing, I'm using a sewing machine, which you need a needle and thread. So there's a lot of different ways that I can go about my idea here. But I think the way I'm going to show it is actually like by measurement, because measurement is one of the important things if you're doing quilting, because if you don't measure accurately, you end up wrecking the material that you're working with. So then you need to keep, recutting, need more fabric, those kinds of things. So I'm kind of making something that looks almost like little measurements that you would see on a ruler, and I'm adding those in this piece. Notice I'm not really writing any words or numbers. I'm just drawing some type of pictorial representation. Again, I'm using repetition. I'm covering the whole background area. I'm overlapping or going off the edge of the page, and I'm thinking about how it's organized. So in my case, all the icicles kind of touched up against one another. Some other people, it might be in rows across. They might have bigger things overlapped with smaller parts. You decide. So now I'm going to work on my next one. I can use these same two ideas and show them in a different way, or I can come up with other ideas about myself. So one of the things that I like to do is I like to go camping, which is another thing that we go and do usually in the woods. So that makes me think of trees. So I might even write that idea in there. And then I want to think of my second idea and how I'm going to do that. And so this time I'm going to actually do sewing and quilting again, but this time I'm going to show it that it looks like shapes and stitching. So I'm kind of showing it in two ways. Now this time I'm going to use repetition, and instead of just showing one tree, I'm going to show multiple trees. So I'm going to start to draw kind of a stylized tree here that goes off the edge of the page. And I'm going to make several trees that look similar. So this time my pieces are next to each other, and then they also overlap a little bit. And I'm going to make these, and they're going to go all the way across that area. Then I'm going to make these a little bit more stylized because I like art and sewing and quilting, that they're going to look a little bit more of like a cartoon type shape. Maybe you have a certain style that you like. This is an area where you can incorporate that style into your artwork. And the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add something that looks kind of like stitching. So around the edge of the trees, I'm going to make it look like these trees were stitched onto the page. And along with that, down at the bottom of the page, I'm also going to add some kind of square pieces that look kind of like a quilted area. So it's going to look like land, but it's also going to look like some rectangular pieces that are overlapping to fill that area. So you can see how I'm using repetition. I'm making it look like it goes all the way behind the head, and I'm making it look like it goes right off the page. Notice I didn't stop the tree before it got to the edge of the page. It's just filling that whole area, starting to look like a background. In some cases, some people have done something onto their clothing or into their hair or into the foreground, but for most of you, it's going to happen in that background area.